Hey everyone in the zone. We want to give a warm welcome to Sean Conley. He's a former NFL kicker and the author of The Point After, this amazing book that I just finished. So we have Sean here to chat about it, and I couldn't be more excited. I literally couldn't put the book down. So, hi Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So obviously, things are probably crazy in your life now. We're all still very much in the pandemic. So how have you been holding up over the last year or so with everything going on?
Yeah, I think as best as we can. My wife and I own yoga studios here in Pittsburgh, but they're all on pause. We're doing everything online and just trying to stay engaged with, our community as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough for everybody, especially in fitness,
Mhm.
in a studio type environment. It's really kind of like you can't really do anything. So you're doing your best from home. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are keeping everything going. And I just really kind of want to dive into The Point After. It honestly, I loved the book. I couldn't put it down. It's about football, but it's like there's so much more than football in this book. So if you love football or a really amazing story, this is definitely a book to read. But what I loved, right on this inside cover, right? It says the greatest moments don't always happen on the field, right here. And I feel like if you were to sum up the book in literally one sentence, I feel like that just encompasses the entire point of writing this. So, what do you think about that? Is that why you wrote that? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a few reasons why I wrote the book, but that was definitely one of them.
Mhm.
My story is a lot more typical of professional athletes and NFL football players. When we watch, like the Super Bowl, and we see like the Tom Brady's and those type of players, where they have these very long, successful careers. The average NFL career is 2.3 years. Like that's it. That's where, like you look at the sideline of 45 players, 40 of them are going to end up there. And that's where I was. And so when I wrote the book, I just thought I wanted to share as much of what I was feeling. So as you mentioned, it's about football, but it's about more than that. So I tried not to write too much about, well, this happened next in the game, this happened next. I tried to share the insecurities that I went through, the fear, the self-doubt, and that way I thought the book would be relatable to not only just like athletes and people into sports, but just everybody who goes through these identity crisis, because that's what it really was for me the whole time. Like, from a young age, I always thought I'd be an NFL football player, and I was for a few fleeting moments in a few years, but then it was taken away from me. And so I wanted to share, that journey, more than the whole football stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that definitely came across. And I think that's eye opening as well that you gave those statistics about the average length of a career. Not all football fans really know that. The rosters are so big
Mhm.
that you only focus on the people that receive attention from the media for the most part. So I think it's really great that you bring awareness to that. And so I really loved reading about your high school experience and how you were a soccer player and then there was no football team. You're like, I can't play, but I can kick. So you're playing soccer and then you were kicking seemingly every free minute that you had, but you kept it internal. You didn't really talk about it with your friends. I know you were very close with your father and he was aware of your training style, but why did you keep it so quiet and talk a little bit about your high school experience from what you can remember? I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, one of the reasons why I kept it quiet is because I was afraid. I hung out with all the other jocks in high school. We played basketball together and soccer together. And in the lunchroom table, we would always kind of talk about like what we're going to do in college, what sport we wanted to play. But for me, it was to be a kicker, and but to say my dream out loud to them, that I was just going to train and kick at this field and then walk on to a Division I team someday and to play in the NFL, they would have laughed at me. And actually, one day I finally got the courage to tell them, and they actually did. They did. One of my best friends laughed in my face, and I threw a pretzel at him, and so that like
I
that
love
was it.
that part. You were so vulnerable in that part too. And you could sense that through your writing, that
Mhm.
you remember that like it was yesterday, because it was such
Yeah.
a pivotal moment. You opened up to your one friend. He responded exactly how you expected him. And you're
Mhm.
just like, all right, whatever. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I loved that.
Yeah, and I think that that's why I kept it on the down low. But I learned a lesson through all this, that it certainly it was is great along my journey. I found people who did believe in me, but at the same time, like there was moments when I didn't, and so I found at a very young age, in high school, that I had to believe in myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to keep moving forward, because the other support systems came and went as I found other coaches along my journey. But if I didn't constantly have some belief in my dream, it would have crumbled much earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so commendable that you essentially kept going. I feel a lot of people have that sort of journey. I know for me, being in sports media, it's just as tough as being an athlete. Like, so having that mentality, I think, is really important if you want to succeed. And yeah, so I thought it was really interesting when you started the book. You started it with the pregame. It wasn't chapter one, it was before the
Mm.
chapters started. But essentially, you were like, this is the most important night of my life. October 10th, 1992. You were playing at a Division I school. We all knew from the start that you ended up going to Pittsburgh, and you're playing against Notre Dame. It's huge and lights and all the drama. So why did you decide to give us that information up front, seemingly because you then took the next few chapters to write about your journey, and it was almost suspenseful, like, is he going to make it? But we already knew that you made it to a D1 school at whatever point. So what was the thought process behind giving us that information first?
Yeah, that was actually a technique I read to help me write this book. While I was writing the book, I would read other athletes' autobiographies, and so a lot of them did this technique, and I knew nothing about writing when I started writing this book, and what I noticed was there was a pattern where these athletes, these writers would find like this huge pivotal moment, but they wouldn't let you what happened after that and what led up to that, and then they would go back in time, almost like when we see this in movies. Sometimes you do that same technique.
Yeah.
And so I just I took some time to think about, like, what was, like, the pinnacle of my sports career. What was, I thought, like, it was the biggest moment. And for me, like, I had some great moments in the NFL, but without that night there, which I found out much later, because what I found out when I played Notre Dame, I never knew it at the time, but there were scouts in the stadium, including the Detroit Lions, which was the team that eventually signed me. So, but before the game, I remember one of the players coming down saying that, he saw guys wearing like a Cowboys jacket and all these other teams. So we knew that. So there was a pressure of that game of not only, winning, beating Notre Dame for college, but we also, at the same time, we all had these individual goals. So I remember that game. If I could have a really good game, maybe somebody would notice me. And then after the game, I still had no idea what kind of impact I made until, I got the call later from the Lions. Fast forward, 7 months later.
Yeah, which you mentioned that, and I wrote down in my notes while I was reading that I got goosebumps, like, after you were sitting there for like the entire draft, like all 7, 8 rounds, and you were like, damn, nobody drafted me. But then you get a call, and you were told, hey, sit tight, because sometimes they will call you right after. And I got goosebumps. So I'm really happy that you just brought that up. But yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, I kind of figured that, but then I was like, okay, so we need to start from the beginning, and then there's so much more after that. And it was really amazing. I just wanted to hear why you did that. But another really pivotal, not pivotal, I guess that's not the right word, another main part of this book is Karen, and she is weaved entirely throughout the story. So I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about Karen.
Yeah, well, Karen's my rock. She was, she's always like been there for me throughout this whole journey, and she's always been right before I could even get there. So for example, like, when I was playing in the NFL, she kept saying, "Hey, you need to take up yoga. Like it'll help you with your body, with your mind." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. That's not how I train. All the training that I did up to this point, which was what most athletes did at that time, was aggressive. It was pushing." And so, of course, she was right, because like once my career ended, then I started doing yoga and it healed my back. If I'd have done that earlier, it would have worked. But where she, was so instrumental in my journey was, what we're talking about earlier, when I was afraid to share my dream with anyone else. She was other than my father in that one time in the lunchroom, I shared it with her when I was in college. And the only reason why I shared it with her is because like, that's who she is. Like she always, is always dreaming, and it's okay to like talk about your dreams and so forth. So when we were dating, she made that really obvious that, cause she was telling me about what she wanted to do and all this adventurous stuff, and thinking outside of the box and not worrying about what people thought. So she was the next person that I shared that with. And so at that point there, that was like a huge connection. And then throughout my whole career, when I'd have these ups and downs, she would always help me get past all that. Because, as a kicker, there's always like this internal dialogue. And I really struggled with that, because I'd get super high, then super low, super high, super low. And I would always keep it in my mind, but she would allow me just talk about what was going on to help me get through it. And, wouldn't always give me advice, but just let me let my fears and doubts, what was happening in my NFL career, and just get them off my chest.
Yeah, just be a support system for you,
Mm-hmm.
like essentially from day one. And it's funny because I was on page 122. Now, Karen, since high school, and you've always had a thing for her, and she's intertwined in this book. And I don't know, a light bulb just went off. And I know books on the back cover, it always tells you at the end of the little paragraph, where they are, what they're doing, blah, 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 blah. So something in my mind, I just was like, I gotta know. I gotta know what happens with Karen. So I was like, ooh, I wonder if they're married. It will say. So then here I am reading like literally the last paragraph, and it's like, okay, well, he's with his wife Karen and their 4 kids, and they own the 3 studios. And it just made me so happy. And I don't know, did I ruin the storyline? No, but I was so invested in this relationship throughout the book, and I'm just so happy that like your girlfriend that you had in college, when she called, she was like, you're with a girl, and like the boyfriend she had in New York. I'm just so happy you were able to work it out, and that everything happens for a reason. I love that.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
That's right.
So, yeah, so like let's get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the book. So, going through college, you obviously didn't have a traditional path, and you were training and training and training and training, and you were also dealing with something that a lot of people deal with and don't talk about a ton. You had ADD. So, here you are growing up, avoiding taking this medication. You're so hyper focused, and you're just trying to, essentially put your dreams together in a little package to propel you to like the end goal of being in the NFL. But it wasn't that simple. So just talk a little bit about your journey through college and the little moves that you had to make here and there to try and prepare yourself for the next step.
Yeah, my college experience was very unusual. So when I graduated high school, I thought, okay, I'm going to walk onto a Division I school, but I got cold feet, and I decided, well, hey, let's start somewhere small and we'll build our way up. And I went to Grove City College, which is a teeny Division III school. And when I first, decided to go to school there, the football coach said, "Yeah, come on down. You can be on the team. I'll let you just join," because it's Division III. There wasn't like tryouts for them. But then when I got there, he changed his mind for some reason, said, "I already have a kicker. I don't need you." And so that was, with the ADD that I have, I was training so hard for that. And like, that was the only thing that I thought I could have, and I couldn't shift on that. So when that ended, I hit pretty hard, and I failed out of school, and I started drinking a lot, and moved back home with my parents, and just, hit rock bottom at that time, until I got lucky. And then there was a Division III school that started up a year later in Erie, where I went back to. And because they were brand new, like anyone could be on the team, even without, any football background. So I got really lucky. It was perfect how that worked out, and that's what catapulted me or gave me the confidence to move on. But I did it even at Gannon. That was a school in Erie that I went to. I didn't do very well. I made four, I believe, out of 16 kicks over a 2-year period. I was kind of like Happy Gilmore, where he would crush the ball like a million miles until he got like a coach, but he had no short game. He had no consistency, had no discipline. That's how I was as a kicker. I could kick the ball, like 65, 68-yard field goals, but they didn't go straight, same with like my kickoff. So, but I didn't want to give up my dream. And this is where like ADD was like a good and a bad thing. It was good because even though from the outside it didn't look like I was a Division I level because of my inaccuracy, but because I was so hyper focused on it, I just kept going. So eventually I went to Pitt and walked on. They had 6 other kickers on scholarship, and luckily eventually I beat them all out and became the starter about half an hour before the first game before
Yeah, I
kickoff.
love that. I was like, he's gonna get it because he talks about Pitt in the pregame. This is gonna be good. So that's funny that it's crazy that you brought it. You were like, I wasn't the most accurate kicker, but you didn't let that change your mentality of the goals that you were trying to accomplish. And I don't think many people understand like the nuts and bolts of being a kicker. It's definitely a position that doesn't get a lot of the spotlight, although it's super important. You win and lose games with field goals and kicks and extra points. So I think that's amazing that you were able to kind of spotlight what you went through so people understood, like, although we're just a kicker, we're special teams, but there were 6 people ahead of you to be on Pitt and they were on scholarship, and you walked in and you were able to beat them all out, which I'm sure was the best feeling, because now here you are, you're on Pitt, and you're like, I'm on D1 now, I'm one step closer to my goal. So I loved that, and I loved the journey that it took us on. So I know your parents were very supportive of you. Tell us about a time when, or were there any times that you just thought like maybe they think I should stop, or they told you to stop, or something along those lines where they were like essentially taking a step back from where they had been your
Mhm.
entire life of being your biggest cheerleader?
Yeah, I mean, they were very supportive. Where we would butt heads is that they were also very conservative. When I was at Gannon, the second stop, I was a special teams captain. I was a starter, and that's when I knew like this is my last chance because I love playing for Gannon. But the challenge was at a small school, like it's not on TV. There's no NFL scouts, and to go to Division III to NFL is pretty much unheard of. So I knew I had to make that jump. Um, so I started calling these Division I schools, and one of them was Villanova. And one day, or when we were visiting the school, when I talked to the people in admissions, and they said, "You're going to lose too many credits. You can't come here." And so, I got back into the car, and my parents were basically like, "Well, maybe you should just stay where you're at. You have it good there." And that's when I really, had I actually pretended to. Well, I did. I opened up the car door on the highway and I told them I would jump out. This was also like one of my ADD things, just where I would just do something spontaneous like that, impulsive. And so we had a conversation in the house, and they were okay with that. But that was always them. Like they always wanted the best for me. At the same time, they didn't want me to get hurt. But like that's where I tried to explain to them, like I just didn't care. Like if I would have, it would hurt me more if I wouldn't have tried to fulfill my dream. Otherwise, I'd have been living with regret on that.
100%. 100%. I totally understand that mindset. And now, so going through, obviously through high school, through college, and into the NFL, you always talked about a nagging injury to your back and your hip
Mhm.
flexor. They couldn't find your hip flexor. A, did you ever find your hip flexor? B, how were you able to continue? I know you took like painkillers and all that and saw trainers, but it seemed like you were in a lot of pain at a lot of different points. So most people, I feel like that would be a point where you give up. Not that you're giving up your dream, but like, my leg is falling off. So now what do I do? So what got you through until the last point when you finally did decide to end your NFL career?
Yeah, yeah. Like as you mentioned, for in college and the first couple years in the NFL, it was just I would just numb it out. I would take these huge like horse pills, like 800 milligram ibuprofens, muscle relaxants, anything to mask the pain. But there became a certain point where like even if I wasn't feeling pain, it didn't matter. You know, my hip was gone, my back was degenerated. But what kept me going was just it was, and I think, you know, a lot of athletes I know go through this as well, where I didn't, I wanted to go out on my own terms. So even though that the injury bug, like the injury got me with my second stop with the Colts, that's where I started, you know, they cut me because I got injury there, and I got cut because I got injured with the New York Jets. I was like, well, this isn't how it's supposed to end because I'm not ready. Cause so, you know, in my heart, my mind, I wasn't ready, no matter how beat up my body was. And you know, you know, happens, you know, every year, like you know, when I follow the NFL, I see these players and the media will say, oh, he should retire, he's washed up. But, you know, there's, you know, all players and most players struggle with like what's next. And so that was my big struggle. Like there wasn't anything else next for me that I could think of, because for me, it was, I'm going to be in the NFL. I made the NFL. So why should it end now? Because if I just keep working harder, I'll be able to get past this injury. And eventually there came a point, no matter how hard I trained, it was, my body wasn't going to have it.
Yeah, and that is, I can understand. I grew up dancing, and so I knew when I had to give up my dancing career, I can understand exactly what you went through. Obviously on a lower level, but it's a lot. You struggle with identity, and I think
Mhm.
anybody going through something like that or has been through something like that would definitely appreciate and love the book, because you can see that. You could see like you were continuing to try because first of all you wanted to, but second of all you're like, this is me, I am football, and without football what am I? So yeah, I just, I really resonated with that. So but let's talk about getting into the NFL. You Every NFL has any ever and every NFL player has an agent. And can we talk about your agent Jimmy, and tell, let's hear a
Yeah.
little bit about like your relationship with him at the beginning.
Yeah, you know, there's a few names in the book I changed. I had to change his because you know, the whole nature of the agents. Yeah, he was, you know, like a lot of agents, when they just they show up and they see players and then they pick them up, and that's how I met Jimmy. He was in his pink tracksuit at the pit place, and I just asked him because I actually got turned down by a couple agents before that, because there's not much money in kickers, especially like rookie kickers. We make like the league minimum and they get a percentage of that. And so, and not only that, but there's only on average in the NFL, there's maybe 3 openings. You know, there's, you know, like 30 NFL teams, but how many actually need a kicker that year? So the payoff for them, all the phone calls, is not worth it. So luckily I got one that was new. But because he was new, we kind of had a roller coaster with all of our of the phone calls and the so forth. It was always unpredictable what was next from Jimmy.
I thought that was so funny. You're just like, hey, are you an agent? Okay, cool. Let's do it. Yeah, and another thing that I thought was really cool that you did was throughout the book, you would explain these situations that would come up on the field, and you would obviously talk in football terms to set the scene, but you would break it down after you would say certain terms just to, open up the eyes of the non-football IQ type people. So what was your thought process behind that? I thought it was really a wonderful thing you did so many more people could understand what you were trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my hope. I read lots of books while I wrote this book, as I mentioned before, and one of the books I read was The Boys in the Boat, which was about like these rowers from Washington
Yeah.
who went on to do like their amazing story. And I, you know, was never someone who was like a fan or was interested in rowing, but when I read that, it was just so fascinating to learn all the little things they did. So I tried to bring that in, just, you know, because I think, you know, reading the book, it's like an added bonus to learn the ins and outs and kickers. And, you know, whenever kickers mess up, or especially here with like the Steelers, I get texts all the time about like, oh, do you see what happened to kickers? So even though the kickers aren't, celebrated, everyone loves to talk about the kickers when they miss the big kick. It's like
Yeah.
the thing to talk about. Everyone, I don't get texts when some kicker makes a 50-yard game winner. Like that's not interesting because like that's his job. But when there's a kicker that's like in a slump and he's missing 2 or 3 in a row, or it's a big game winner, then everybody wants to talk about the kicker and why he missed, and where the lace is out, that's like the whole thing. And so I try to explain that too, because like, everything has to go right. For the time the ball is snapped, the kicker has 1.2 seconds to kick it. And not only that, but the holder has to get it. He has to spin the laces, and there's so much that could go wrong. And then the sweet spot on the football is the size of like a button. And so when we see these kickers, they miss by like a foot to the right. If only 90% of his foot hit that sweet spot, like that's it. He's going to miss it. Or his hips are, instead of being able to close his hips, if they're slightly open by an inch and it's a 40-yard field goal, it's going to go to the right. So it may look easy, but everything has to go perfectly for it to go right.
Yeah. I don't think it looks easy. I think it looks nice, and it seems like maybe easy because you're just doing a little kick, but like, no. When I watch football, I'm like, this is tough. This is hard. And I feel like this past season, more than any, we saw missed extra points more
Yep.
so than
The
we.
30-yard extra point is a game changer.
Yeah.
It's mental too, because the
Yeah.
20-yard extra point, you could miss-hit it. You could miss a sweet spot, but you're so close,
Yep.
you're going to get lucky, and it'll squeeze, like those extra points you see would squeeze through.
Yep.
Those are no more. Like the margin of error on the extra point now it's shifted.
Yeah, it totally, you could see the difference, you could sense it, and it just was eye-opening, to be honest with you. Okay, so one specific person I do want to ask you about, somebody you referenced throughout the book, Amos Jones. What is your relationship like with him? I know you thanked him in the acknowledgments after the book was over, and he was really instrumental in your career. So talk a little bit about your relationship with him.
Yeah, we've never lost touch. We're still great friends, and not only are me and Amos still close, but also Karen and his wife are close, and their kids know our kids. They're all about the same age, so it's crazy how we've been lucky to stay in touch with him over the years. He's actually now with the New York Giants. Last year he was with Tampa, so since my career ended, he's been with maybe 7 or 8 different NFL teams, college, since I left, and he's still at it. And he's a super well-respected coach. He was so instrumental for me, and he still has that role where he just is able to connect with players as a fatherly figure. And a lot of these players struggle with that when they are, away from home, the teams, and not too many coaches can do that. But Amos was someone who, he always told me, like, the type of players that he loved and gravitated to were the players who were just like a 2-star recruit,
Mm-hmm.
but they work so hard to be like a 5-star player. He had a hard time connecting with players who were the 4 and 5 stars, who thought just based on that they would be good. And he would struggle coaching them, and it wasn't his, it was the player who just thought that, hey, I'm D1 or I'm NFL, I made it. But he could always connect with like players like myself who just wanted to like just do all the little things and show up and work. And those are the players that he's always been able to get the best out of. So he's just an amazing guy and coach.
Yeah, and it definitely came across. And it's funny you mentioned when he had you as an athlete, he was only 10 years older than you, so he's younger than I
Yep.
am right now.
Yep.
And was still able to be that father figure because you were away from your father and you were very close with your father. So I think that's great that you developed that relationship. And transitioning into when your father passed away, that was a tough chapter to read. And once again, I feel like it's always hard to, my father also passed away 5 years ago. So as I'm reading that, I'm like, I know what he's going through. I was 30 when my dad passed away. And what were you, 27, 28?
30 as well.
Oh, you were 30. Okay.
25 when he was diagnosed, and then
Okay.
30.
And
Yeah.
30. Okay. So I really, it resonated with me what you were going through. So, and also that your grandparents passed away like right after. Essentially the same thing happened with me. So I really just connected with that, which is really sad. I'm sorry that I'm being
Yeah,
like
I'm
a
sorry
Debbie
too.
Downer, but that what was writing that chapter like for you?
Yeah, that was hard, but it was also very therapeutic. When my career ended, I was just beginning to like get over it and realize like, hey, I got to move on. Like, you're never going to be an NFL player. It's okay. So I was starting to transition, and that was right. And then right as I was starting to move forward, that's when my father, called and told me that. And it was hard because like my father was like super supportive, but also not like the biggest communicator. He communicated through just like his actions. Like, he'd show up at all my games when we played the University of Hawaii. It wasn't on TV in Erie. So him and my mom drove down to Pittsburgh, stayed at a Holiday Inn to watch the game. When I was with the Colts and I was struggling with the injury, he called me up and said, I'm going to be there tomorrow. And he got a room at the Motel 6. And then I was able to sneak out and stay with him that night, and toilet ran all night and all that good stuff. But like that, and he rarely told me like that he loved me or would say things, but it was just there. And so for me, it was just, to write that chapter, because I held on to a lot of, like when my father passed away, I didn't cry much. I just held it all in. I just denied it. I'm going to compartmentalize it and just somehow pretend that it didn't happen, because we were so close and we would talk every day. And so finally writing that helped me process. And I remember even like crying sometime when I was writing it, because I was like, wow, like I just try to just, I try to engross myself in my job at the time and my kids and Karen. So I never really experienced the grief that I probably should have. So that was very helpful when I wrote that.
I'm sure it's really, everybody has a different way of grieving. I was
Mhm.
very emotional and I cried every freaking second. Um, my brother is the complete opposite. So yes, I understand and I can see how that would be therapeutic, but just I love that you were able to transition into a successful career, but then also realize, hey, this isn't doing anything for me. I am not happy. I'm making a lot of money to support my family, but at the same time, your heart wasn't in it. And Karen finally convinced you to get into yoga. And we all know now you, as a family, own 3 studios. And just tell me a little bit about that transition from corporate life and tons of money to being holistic and happy and more flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the corporate life working for the pharmaceutical and biotech companies, is great. I met so many amazing people. But what it did to me was I would try to fill up the void of like goals and accomplishing things and competing. And so that's what I would do. I would work really hard. I always wanted to win all the sales competitions, and I did. I kept like that worked really well. But I found I was just starting to spin the hamster wheel again, and it really wasn't like my heart was into football, but my heart was never into this type of job. It was more about like you said, like it was just about making money. And I started on the side teaching yoga, and what I started to realize, the more I taught yoga, that like, wow, this is I can now, because of what I went through in my football career, and dealing with my identity and also my injuries, I discovered that yoga helped me with both. And so the more I did that, the more I realized like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I can actually give back, after putting all that time into football and what I went through. Then now I can do this, because the whole struggle of identity, it's we all go through this, whatever, if we're a teacher or a janitor or whatever job we have. And so that helped me, when I teach yoga, to help people. Just my goal when I teach yoga is just to help people get some peace of mind, like to step out of the craziness for an hour, and to work on whatever they're working on, but also to help them with their physical body. So I was able to do both. And now I've been doing it for 20 years, and I don't see myself stopping, because I've found so much fulfillment in it. And it's just, I never thought I would end up this way, especially with football. Like it was a complete opposite of what I was doing. And it was like, so like, back in the day, I would think, oh, this is unmasculine. but now it's like I've completely dissolved like that sort of thinking, because that just doesn't matter. And that just, so here I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, 20 years ago, um, like mindfulness and yoga and like taking a minute to pause, like these types of things were not really something that everybody talked
Exactly.
about.
Hmm.
So I love that you essentially weaved through these quotes from other people, like when Deacon Larry was like, you could go to the gym and have ripped abs and do all this stuff for 2 hours and you can't sit for 5 minutes to like calm your mind. And that was like when you were starting college, when he had to bring you to your court date. Like, and now look at you, you own yoga studios. And it's just, I just think it's amazing that some of my favorite quotes you mentioned, you had to learn how to lose to win. And it's just, and you had a whole chapter on, not a whole chapter, but a whole paragraph about the moment you realized that nothing, no one, not accomplishing things is going to make you happy, that it's a mindset and you choose to be happy. And I literally live my life like that, so it stuck out to me. But I think now with like the mindfulness and all of that, that's kind of taking over now, people are starting to think like that. So have you noticed a change as well? Because I see things big now compared to not big
It,
previously.
yeah, the shift has been huge, and it's just from around like 98, 2000 to now, it's completely shifted, where anything like even talk about, mental health and athletes is something they're only starting to talk about maybe 5 years ago.
Yep.
So yoga and meditation was maybe getting into the mainstream 15, 20 years ago. And so but now, the more like mental health and athletes, so yeah, there's definitely a shift, and it seems like now, football or football players, athletes are, they don't see, there doesn't seem to be that fear as much to express like what they're going through, because it was such a stigma to like talk about any of that stuff. I know when I played, like, it just wasn't accepted that you'd go to your coach to talk about like how you're feeling in your head. It just that just wasn't it. You just didn't do that. But it's definitely shifted, and now, most NFL teams have a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, sports psychologist that are on staff in some ways, and it's completely shifted. And luckily, people like LeBron James and Kobe Bryant was really into it, and so because of players like that, now it's like, well, of course you do something for your mind.
Yeah.
So it's definitely shifting in a positive direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really loved throughout the book that that was always something, not that maybe at the beginning you couldn't recognize it, but like essentially we see that like you've had a shift and you recognize it, and now your life is, you're happy, you're where you need to be, and this is what's going on. So I feel like we could talk about this all day, but
Mhm.
I think we got to the nuts and bolts. Is there anything that I missed that you would like to mention?
No, I no, I this has been so much fun. No, this is awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been
Yeah.
so much fun. And I know anybody and everybody should definitely read this book. It was really, really good. I honestly, I couldn't put it down. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting right here. Um, so I love football. So I loved that aspect of it. But I also love a good story. And I was reading this and I'm like, the line was a little bit blurred for me. I'm like, is this real or is this a novel? So that's kind of how it read. It reads like it's a story, and then you're like, this is somebody's life. Like this is real life. So I think that made it better. So I love a good book. This was a great book. Thank you for writing it. And
Oh, I appreciate that. That's so kind of you. Thank you.
yeah, no, I loved it. I was like, I can't wait to talk to him. So yeah, so hopefully, whenever people watch this, go get The Point Actor. Where can they get it? Can you buy it wherever books are sold?
Yeah, it's wherever they're sold. I think now with what's happening, I don't know if it's in all the bookstores, but if they don't have it in the bookstore, they can order it. But it's available online on Amazon and all those other websites. They can get it there for sure.
Amazing. It's definitely a feel good book. Make you smile, make you cry. I cried a little. And yeah, I think everybody should get it. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, Jackie.